Hi, my name is Richelle Witherspoon. I'm the Nursing, Kinesiology, and Psychology librarian here at UNB, and today's talk is about how not to miss stuff. So it's a look into advanced searching practices for the health sciences, in particular for nursing. So, how do you avoid missing things that you need when you're doing your searches? First step is pretty simple. It's ask a question. And the tricky part to this is to ask a question that is neither too specific nor too broad. And generally, I think people mostly know what these things are, so don't ask a question that has like 10 different pieces to it. Try not to ask questions that are specific to a small local area. Basically, you need to find a topic that people have done research on. That's not a topic that everyone has done research on. And some of the factors you think about when you're formulating your question are sort of summarized by the acronym PICO or PCOT. We have population, issue or intervention, comparator, outcome, and sometimes a time component to it. So population is who are you looking at in terms of your health study? What population is impacted by it? Issue or intervention is what's the factor that's making things happen? Comparator is what are you comparing your factor or your population against? So, or your intervention against? And I'll get a bit more into that. And your outcome is what are you hoping to find when you look at what happened, or what was happening? Time, of course, is over a duration of a year or 6 months or 1 month. I find the time one is a little bit more flexible, a little loose, and often not used, which is why people say PICO or PCOT. So, if this is my research question, in obese patients, are longer needles, as compared against standard length needles, more effective for intramuscular injection? I do have those components in it. So I have my population, which is obese patients. I have my intervention, which is longer needles. My comparator is the standard length needle, so what I'm comparing those longer needles against. And my outcome is I want to know about how effective intramuscular injections are in a case where longer needles are used for obese patients. So this is my question, my pieces. This is how I'm going to formulate things, and in general, how you should think about formulating things. I'm not super rigid on the PICO-PCOT concept, because sometimes you do have population or questions where you need to have two population pieces, or you have interventions that are more complex than one eye can account for. But these are the pieces that typically come into play. So, moving on from a question and having PICO, we have to identify the key components. And this is actually pretty much the same thing as identifying your PICO components, although sometimes there's some deviation between them. So I would say in most cases, your PICO and your key components are like your PICO, but not necessarily. And sometimes you can't include all four. You need to pick 2 or 3 and prioritize them according to the level of importance to the purpose behind your question. That being the case, for this particular instance, this question I've created, I'm gonna limit it down to needle length, intramuscular injection, and obese adults, because that's really what I care about. I want to know if needle length makes a difference. Once I've identified my key components for a question, I need to think about what other words could be used to describe them. So there are lots of ways I can do this. I can just come up with them on my own. I've had a lot of practice. If you're not so good at coming up with your own synonyms for yourself, you have options like visiting a thesaurus for terms that are more common and regularly used. Or you can do things like go into a database and just type it in and see what other terms are being used in abstracts or subject terms inside those records in the database. So just scoping it out, maybe read an article and see what other terms they might use, because you will find multiple terms used in each article. In this case, for this question, my major synonyms are needle length, long needle, longer needle, and length of needle. For obesity, I have obese, but I also have BMI over 30, because that's something that's frequently used in the literature. And for intramuscular injection, I have intramuscular injection, and I could use IM because it's a frequently used short form. The problem with IM is that it's really just 2 letters, and there's too much variation in databases. If I typed IM, I'm going to get all sorts of things I don't intend. So I'm going to leave that out, but it is an option that I had available to me, and I've chosen not to use it, which is perfectly okay. If you have a reason not to use a synonym, it's fine to reject it. Okay, so once I have my synonyms, I can look into truncation. And truncation is this really, really useful tool that most databases have available to you, where you can use an asterisk, so that little star sign, to shorten a word to its root, and then basically say, and any possible ending. So in the case of obesity, I can shorten it to OBES, and have obese and obesity wrapped into one search. Again, strengths and weaknesses here. This is really, really useful to avoid writing out multiple variations of a word. The balance to it is you need to be really careful not to shorten words down too much. So when I initially tried this search out to see if it worked, I did test OBES to find out if it was too short, if there were other variations or other words that could begin. I couldn't think of any, but I always like to test it out to see how things go. In this case, OBES is fine. In most cases, I would say that a 4-letter root word is a little on the short side and something to be wary of. But do try, do test it out, do see where things are going, and make those decisions for yourself. So that's how truncation works, and it's great. Phrase searching is another piece that's really, really necessary when you're doing searches that involve keywords that are more than 1 word in length. For instance, if I want to search needle length, I can't just search needle and length separately. I can't just search them like needle length without quotation marks, because if I do that, the database searches them apart. So it might look for needle length, but it will also look for needle and length in 2 separate places in the paper, and that's not useful. So using quotation marks tells the database to treat needle length as if it's 1 word, which is how I intended it in the first place. So again, anytime you have a search term that is more than 1 word long, those quotation marks become very important. It just condenses your search down to the really relevant stuff, instead of making you sift through lots of stuff that you don't care about. Subject terms. Subject terms are a little more complicated, but are really, really nice and useful once you understand them. So basically, subject terms are the filing system of databases. It's like if you put a librarian in charge of hashtags. It's just one idea that encapsulates all sorts of different things, or all sorts of things that fall under that category. So here's my example. So in this search, I'm interested in obesity, but looking at this as it is, you have body weight. Body weight is a subject term, and it describes everything that falls under its category, which here includes overweight, obesity, and different kinds of obesity. Overweight is also a subject term. Obesity is also a subject term, as are the ones that fall beneath it. So it is a branching system that gets more and more specific as you go down the branches. But here I'm going to search obesity, and when I do that, I'm going to get obesity plus all of its narrower terms and any synonyms to obesity. So obesity will include obesity, these 3 shorter or sort of more narrow terms. It'll include any BMIs over 30. It'll include all of those ideas that relate to obesity that don't actually get described by that particular term. And obesity is a little difficult because it is kind of the term that's used all the time. But this would also work for other terms, like vaccination. If you had vaccination, it would include things like inoculation or immunization, right under that term right there for you. So that's kind of the way they work. They're like this super synonym that describes the entire subject area, instead of using all the synonyms. Not instead of using all the synonyms, because you do have to use them all. But to catch anything you might miss when you're generating synonyms for yourself. Yeah. So they're really a filing system for databases. I'm going to show you how to tap into that filing system and use it to your best effect when you're actually doing a search. But before I go into the database, I'm going to cover one more piece that I'm going to get to while I'm in there, that I'm going to be using while I'm in there. So all of these things are things I'm going to show you how to use in a live database demonstration. And that is, once you have your terms and you've done this truncation and this phrase searching and you've gathered your subject terms, what do you do with them? Because searching them one by one isn't really going to get you where you need to be, at least not by itself. So to combine search terms, we're going to use Boolean operators. In particular, we're going to use two Boolean operators, or and. And we're going to use them to bring it all together in one gloriously beautiful search. So, or. Or is a command to the database that is used when you're combining synonyms, so words that mean the same thing or have the same importance in the context of your question, that same piece of your question. In this case, needle length and long needle. Don't really care which one you get. Either is fine, both are fine. So I want to combine those with or to get any article that has at least one of those two terms, if not both. Once I've created my or groupings, so I'll have an or grouping for needle length, and I'll have one for obesity, and I'll have one for intramuscular injection. I'm going to go into and is the Boolean operator that combines two separate concepts that are both important to the question. So I want to have an article that has some representation of needle length, as well as a representation of obesity. Because both of these pieces are equally important in my question. Neither one alone is sufficient. So that fills in this nice little middle piece to get me where I need to be. The last thing, and I've kind of touched on it, and I'll touch on it again, is using both together. So ultimately, what I'm going to do is use or to connect needle length, length of needle, long needle, and longer needle, or to connect my obesity terms, and or to connect my terms related to intramuscular injection, and then take those three or statements or groupings and combine them with and to get any article in that center piece. So any article that has at least one term from each of those three pieces. So in theory, my results should have only articles in them that talk about needle length in obese people receiving intramuscular injection, which is what I care about. And it's this beautiful way to avoid serial searching, so search after search after search that's not successful. It gets rid of duplicates between those searches, and it just captures everything all in one place, which is really, really nice and important to be able to do to make sure you're not missing things that you need. So all that hopefully making sense. I'm going to go into a database. So in previous videos, I've talked a lot about CINAHL, because CINAHL is your core nursing database. However, today I'm going to use PubMed. And there's lots of ways to get into PubMed, the same way there are to get into other databases. I'm going to use the Databases tab, just because it's quick and easy. And the reason I'm using PubMed today is twofold. Oops, something's going on with my again. So the reason I'm using PubMed is twofold. First of all, PubMed is free and available to you after you leave UNB, so if you do need access to health research, this is the place you can search. Second of all, It's because at this point you probably are already familiar with CINAHL, and I'd like to show you another database. And PubMed is great. PubMed is a large database with lots of content. I find it more difficult to use than CINAHL, but it is not difficult to use. Like, it's certainly searchable, and is a good resource to be familiar with. So I'm going to start by doing a search related to needle length. So I'm going to go needle length with those quotation marks around it. You'll note here that I did not use an asterisk in this case, and that's not because I don't want to. It's because, despite what I said earlier and showed in my slides, PubMed will not allow you to use truncation and phrase searching at the same time. It allows for both separately. It will actually let you do a search with both, but not produce the results that you intend to have show. So I'm going to have to do without truncation while I'm doing phrase searching in PubMed. And it's unfortunate, and they are coming up with a new interface for PubMed that I hope will fix that problem. But for now, this is what we're stuck with. So needle length. I'm going to go needle lengths. And that accounts for those, that asterisk that I would have used. Length of needle. Length of needles. I'll stop and point this out. So it says quoted phrase not found. This is something that PubMed does, and it tries to fill in the blanks to give me what I want. This is not what I wanted. PubMed is really bad at guessing what you want, as are other databases. This is not a PubMed thing. So I'm going to go into my search results and just get rid of that because it's gonna mess things up a little later. Actually, I'm going to double check that I didn't get something funny from length of needle because I wasn't paying close attention. Oh, and see here, quoted phrase not found. So I don't want to get into that stuff. It's just going to make it messy. So I'm going to quickly just delete those from my search history. Okay, and I'll just stick with needle lengths. I do want to do a search for, let's go back to PubMed. Long needle. And long needles. That was okay. Let's do longer needle. And longer needles. And we were okay with all of those terms. Yeah. So from here, I have my search terms. I have my variations that I would have got through truncation if I'd been able to use that with the phrase searching. Noting that in most databases you can do truncation and phrase searching at the same time, but PubMed itself doesn't allow that. Now what I need to do is I need to see if there are any subject terms that relate to needle length. I don't believe there are, but I'm going to go take a quick look. In PubMed, their subject term dictionary, thesaurus, is called MESH. It stands for Medical Subject Headings, and it's used by PubMed and by Cochrane and by some national associations do use MESH. CINAHL uses a variation on MESH. They have their own, but it is very similar. You'll find the same terms are often applied. So in PubMed it's called MESH. In other databases you'll be able to find it under things like the thesaurus or subject headings or CINAHL headings. Those kinds of terms. You might see controlled vocabulary is a word you might find it under. So that's how that works in other databases. And you'll find what I'm teaching today is applicable across databases. There's some variations in where the search history is, where the subject headings are, how the truncation is applied within or without quotation marks, but the same methodology does work. Anyway, so we're going to find MESH, which is right there. And I'm just going to check out needle length. I'm not going to use quotation marks in this case. I don't tend to be really specific in my mesh searches because that just limits what you're going to find. And you want to be fairly broad when you're digging through looking for one specific term. You can see there's not one for needle length. I'm going to just look at maybe long needle, no items. I wonder what there is related to just needles. I don't think we care about biopsies in this case. Needle exchange, needle sharing. So not really where we need to be. And that's okay. There isn't always a subject term for each key component in your question. It's just always good to check to see if there's one available to you because they serve as a catch-all for something your synonyms might miss. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to PubMed and continue searching for intramuscular injection. It is really important from this stage in PubMed that I go back to PubMed. So currently I'm searching through Mesh, which is its own like miniature database. And it's really easy to get lost inside of Mesh, especially because it does have its own advanced searching features. So this little symbol means I'm in the wrong place. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom and go back to where I need to be. Okay, so I've done needle lengths. I'm going to go intramuscular injection. And got some good results. Again, because I can't use truncation with inside quotation marks, I'm going to add in just intramuscular injections to get that plural. My third option for a synonym was to use IM, which is just too short, too small, too generic to use in a database effectively. It'll just cause problems in my searches later. So I'm going to stick with just those two. Now I would say there probably is a mesh term for intramuscular injections, so I'm going to go look that up. And there is injections, intramuscular. I can learn a little bit about it. It's for the forceful administration into a muscle of liquid medication, nutrient, or other fluid through a hollow needle piercing. I can find what other terms you might look for. They're basically all the same term, just with commas in different places. And I can see where it falls in that branching hierarchy. So it's under injections, not surprisingly. That's just where it falls. So I do want to use this because it is exactly the term I'm looking for. And the way to do that is to add to Search Builder and search PubMed. And that will get me out of Mesh and into PubMed where I like to be. Okay. So I now have my terms for needle length, my terms and my subject term for intramuscular injection, and I'm going to go on to that obesity component. This one's pretty easy. I'm going to go obese. Whoops, that's not what I did. Obese. I can use the asterisk in this case because it is a one-word search term, so I can just go ahead and search that pretty easily. Then I could do something like BMI over 30, if I want to be really inclusive, because that's my other term that I found when I was looking. Oh, and we have quoted phrase not found, so apparently it's not as popular as I thought it was. Again, that's this little alert sign. So I'll just pop back in and remove that from my search to keep things nice and tidy. And I know this seems like a lot of steps. It's really not hard. And it does produce a very good result for searching that you know is comprehensive and gets you the best stuff, which will help you write your papers, because it's always easier to write a paper when you have the right results, the right research to begin with. There's no like stretching to make things meet that don't really meet. It's just nicely together in one place with one search that takes a few minutes, but is one search and is relatively low stress, I hope. Or it should be. If this is really freaking you out, by all means come talk to me or send me an email. I'm happy to help where I can. Okay, so we have obesity searched up. Now I want to go back to the search because we still need the subject term for obesity, and I guarantee there is one because it's a pretty big deal. obesity. You can see obesity falls here. It has some narrower terms related to it. It falls under overnutrition, under overweight. So it actually falls in multiple locations within the branching structure, but it is the same term. And just really, really nice, at least for searching purposes. So again, I'm going to add that to my search builder and search PubMed, which will bounce me out of Mesh and back into PubMed. At this point, I have done all of my searching. I've searched all of my terms, all of my subject terms, and they are grouped neatly under my search history, which I get to by clicking on Advanced Search. So I've been in and out of here a little bit, but this is now where I need to be. Okay. So from here, I have a bunch of searches that on their own are not particularly useful. No one of these searches was going to get me where I needed to be. What I need to do now is go back to those Boolean operators that I talked about and bring it all together. So I'm going to start by grabbing all of my needle length ones and clicking add. And do watch how this goes, because as I add terms, it's going to bump my lines down a little bit, so just be careful about that. You can see it's bouncing me down and down. And that should be all of my needle length related terms. And now I want to change this to or, right? Because we use or to combine our synonyms. And we'll use and to combine the concepts, like the separate distinct pieces of the question. So I'm going to do that and click search. And that will give me every item in PubMed that uses at least one of those terms in it. And if you want to sort of verify your work at this stage, you can see that 564 is larger than any one of these, but it is smaller than the sum of them. So if you added up all of the terms related to related to needle length, it would be more than 564, because by doing the search this way, we've gotten rid of the duplicates that would create a larger number. So you want a number that is bigger than any individual number, but smaller than their sum. Okay, we've done needle length. Now I'm going to go through and do intramuscular injection and its synonym as well as its subject term. Change these to or and search that. And I'll do the same thing for obesity. I'll add obesity and the subject term for obesity, combine them with or, and do a search. So now what I have are what I call or groupings. So we have a group of 3 groups of terms that represent each of the main concepts that we were going to search. So everything related to needle length, everything related to IM, and everything related to obesity in 3 neat little packages. With these, we're going to take them, add them together, keep that and there this time, so add, keep it and this time, and get to that tiny little piece in the center of the Venn diagrams I showed earlier, where every article that comes up should have at least one of each of those pieces. So one word related to needle length, one word related to IM, and one related to obesity. You can see here we're down to 16 results. This number is by its nature going to be small because there are not many articles on a topic like this. The research is growing. When I initially did the search a couple years ago, there were like 5 articles and they weren't very good, so things are getting a little better. But it remains a fairly small topic, although a fairly important one. So the thing to know about this end result is that it could be 0. It could be 20. It could be 50. Typically not much higher than that unless, and if it gets much higher than that, you might want to add in another component to narrow it back down again. So I might have added in my outcome in this case. I could have said, effectiveness. But 16 is already very small. If I put effectiveness in here, I'm going to end up with nothing. So I'm going to stick with what I've got. You can see the first couple aren't quite where I need to be. We can see how needle length makes a difference here. Are IM injections in obese and overweight females? Sorry, are they actually IM in obese and overweight females? Does obesity prevent the needle from reaching the muscle? So those topics are being addressed exactly as I hoped they would. So just to recap quickly, what I've done is I've taken a question with those PICO components, so a population, intervention, comparator, and outcome, and occasionally time, but I didn't in this case. I found the keywords or the key components I wanted to identify. So intramuscular injection, needle length, and obesity. I generated synonyms for those key components. I took those synonyms and I found I took those words again and I found their subject term to capture anything my synonyms didn't capture, just in case I missed something. And then I used Boolean operators to combine them, by using OR to combine synonyms, and then AND to combine those 3 OR groupings of synonyms. So I hope that all made sense. And if it doesn't, again, by all means, send me an email. My email is in my PowerPoint, which I will reopen right now. So, Richelle Witherspoon, rwithers@unb.ca, and I'm happy to answer any questions that come up.